It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening. The sun was setting, the neighborhood was quiet, and my 14-year-old son, Malik, is doing what he's done every Tuesday for the past year, taking out the trash. No drama, no noise, just a kid helping with chores. But what happened next left me speechless, angry, and honestly, heartbroken. Out of nowhere, a woman from down the street, someone we barely even know, stepped outside, phone already in hand, and started yelling across the lawn. She claimed Malik was suspicious, that he didn't belong, and that he might be doing something illegal. I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the moment I heard her say, "I'm calling 911," my stomach dropped. This wasn't a joke. This woman, who we now know goes by the name Karen Reali, called the police on my black son for simply walking to the curb with a trash bag. And the worst part? She tried to make it sound like he was dangerous, like he was some kind of threat just because of the color of his skin. In that moment, everything changed. What was meant to be a simple task turned into a terrifying situation that could have ended much worse. As we waited for the police to arrive, all I could think about was how fast things escalate for black boys like Malik. How one phone call, one false accusation, could alter his life forever. Why did she target him? What did the police do when they showed up? And how did our neighbors respond once the truth started coming out? This story isn't just about a phone call, it's about fear, race, and what it means to grow up black in America. Stay tuned. Because what happened next will truly shock you. Malik is the kind of kid who keeps to himself. He's polite, loves basketball, and always tries to do the right thing. That night, he had just come home from school, grabbed a snack, and remembered the trash needed to go out. Nothing unusual. But the moment he stepped onto the sidewalk with the bin, Karen, who lives 3 houses down, appeared out of nowhere, staring like she'd never seen him before. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even try to speak to him. She just reached for her phone and started dialing. I watched everything unfold from the front window. First, I thought maybe she saw something else. Maybe she thought there was a real emergency. But then I heard her voice loud enough for neighbors to hear, telling the dispatcher that a young man was roaming around, acting suspicious and might be scoping houses. My heart was pounding. Malik wasn't even near her property. He was right in front of our house. I rushed outside, trying to stay calm. I asked her what the problem was. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Is this your son? He looks out of place." I didn't recognize him. Out of place. In his own neighborhood? I told her we've lived here for over 6 years. She blinked like it didn't register, then turned away, still on the phone with 911. Meanwhile, Malik just stood there, confused, holding the trash bag like it was some kind of evidence. I could see how uncomfortable he felt, how unsure. He kept asking me quietly, "Did I do something wrong?" That question cut deeper than anything else. And then we heard the sirens in the distance, getting closer. Blue and red lights started flashing down the street. My heart sank as the patrol car pulled up and the officer stepped out. What he said next made everything worse. The officer stepped out of the car slowly, hand resting near his belt, eyes scanning the scene. He didn't smile. He didn't even ask who called. His first words were directed at Malik. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" My son looked frozen, like he didn't know if he should speak or stay quiet. I quickly stepped between them and said, "He's taking out our trash. That's it. This is our house." The officer raised an eyebrow but didn't relax. Still standing off to the side, chimed in loudly. I didn't recognize him. He looked suspicious. I thought it was a break-in. At that point, a few neighbors started coming out, hearing the sirens, seeing the lights. Most just stood back, watching. A few looked at me with sympathy, but no one stepped forward. I could feel the pressure building in my chest. Malik was trying to stay composed, but his eyes kept shifting from me to the officer and back again. He didn't understand why this was happening, and honestly, neither did I. One of the subplots that made this harder was that this wasn't the first time Karen had acted strange around us. A few months back, she left a note on our door complaining about too much noise when Malik and his friends played basketball in the driveway. Another time, she stared him down when he walked our dog past her yard. We always brushed it off as uncomfortable, but not serious. But this night showed just how far she was willing to go. As more officers arrived, Malik was asked to put the trash down and keep his hands visible. My son, barely a teenager, was being treated like a threat. I kept asking myself, if this was a white kid doing the exact same thing, would this even be happening? The tension was thick, and I could feel Malik starting to break under the pressure. And then, one of the officers reached for his radio and said something that sent chills down my spine. The officer pressed the button on his radio and said, "We've got a possible 10 to 66. Request backup to secure the area." My heart dropped. A 10 to 66 usually means a suspicious person. But with the way they were reacting, it felt like they were preparing for something far worse. I stood firm between Malik and the officers, trying to keep my voice steady. He's a kid. He didn't do anything. This is his home. But no one seemed to be listening. It was like we were invisible, like the facts didn't matter once that phone call had been made. Karen was still standing by her mailbox, arms crossed, acting like she'd done something noble. One of the neighbors, Mr. Patel, finally walked over. He's lived across from us for years. "Quiet man, never causes trouble." He said, "That boy lives here. He's their son. I've seen him take out the trash 100 times." I thought maybe that would help, that hearing it from someone else would calm things down. But the officers didn't even respond to him. They kept their focus on Malik, who is now visibly shaking. The lights from the second patrol car lit up. The whole block and more neighbors stepped out. Phones were coming out, people recording, whispering. But no one stepped close. No one asked Karen why she had made the call in the first place. It was like they were waiting to see what would happen, unsure whether to believe their own eyes. Then, one officer took a step closer to Malik and said, "Put your hands where I can see them." My son, trembling, raised his hand slowly. That image, my child holding his hands up in front of our house with a trash bag at his feet, will never leave me. I could hear him whispering, "I'm not doing anything, I swear." But the officer didn't stop. He kept moving closer, reaching behind him. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. And in that moment, I knew things were about to explode, just as the officer's hand moved behind his back, likely toward his cuffs. A voice cut through the tension, strong, firm, and unexpected. "Officer, that's enough. Step back." Everyone turned. A woman was walking briskly up the sidewalk, badge in hand, dressed in plain clothes. I didn't recognize her at first, but she introduced herself quickly. "Detective Lewis, off duty. I live 2 blocks over." I saw the call go out and recognized the address. She walked straight between the officers and Malik, placing herself firmly in front of my son. "This boy lives here," she said, pointing toward our home. "I've seen him outside dozens of times. This is not a criminal situation. It's a scared teenager taking out the trash." Karen's face went pale. She tried to speak, but Detective Lewis held up her hand. "You described him as suspicious because he's black. That's profiling, not protecting." Her voice was calm, but full of weight. The officers hesitated, unsure now, their confidence shaken. One of them asked for her ID again, and after checking it, their posture shifted slightly. But the tension still hung in the air like thick fog. Then came the second twist. Detective Lewis turned to Karen and said, "This isn't your first time calling in false reports, is it?" The whole crowd fell silent. Karen stammered, but said nothing. "You reported a Latino teen last summer, claimed he was casing cars. Turned out he was waiting for his mom in the driveway, and a delivery guy before that. You accused him of stealing packages. The report was closed when they found out it was his route." Suddenly, this wasn't just about Malik. It was about a pattern, a history of targeting people who didn't fit. Karen's idea of who belongs. The officers exchanged glances, clearly reevaluating the situation. But Malik was still standing there with his hands raised, and my pulse hadn't slowed. We weren't out of danger yet, and what happened next would decide everything. Detective Lewis turned back to Malik, her voice softer now. "You're okay. Put your hands down, son." Slowly, Malik lowered his arms, his eyes still wide with fear. I moved beside him and held his shoulder, just trying to reassure him that it was over, even if it didn't feel like it. The officers, now clearly uncomfortable, stepped back and started to de-escalate. One of them mumbled an apology, but it felt hollow. The damage had already been done. Karen stood frozen, arms crossed tighter than before, her confidence clearly shaken by Detective Lewis's words. But just as the situation seemed to be calming down, the final twist hit. Detective Lewis stepped closer to her and said, "You should know that filing a false report is a criminal offense, especially when it puts someone's life at risk." Karen laughed nervously, brushing it off like it was a misunderstanding. "I didn't mean harm. I just, didn't recognize him." But then Lewis pulled out her phone and showed the officers something. "This isn't about not recognizing him. It's about using 911 like it's your personal security line." To our shock, Detective Lewis had body cam footage from her own security system. Karen had walked by her house earlier that week, ranting to another neighbor about new people on the block and how she planned to keep the area safe. It wasn't just bias, it was intent. It's clear, vocal, and recorded. The officers went quiet. Then one of them stepped toward Karen and said, "Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you a few questions." She tried to protest, but this time no one was listening. The neighbors, once silent, began murmuring. A few even nodded toward Malik and me with something like respect or maybe just realization, as Karen was gently escorted toward the patrol car. Not under arrest, but no longer protected by her lies. I looked at my son. He was still shaken, but standing tall. That night, Malik didn't just take out the trash. He stood up to a system that too often sees kids like him as threats, and the neighborhood would never see us the same again. The next few days were quiet, but not in a bad way. Neighbors who'd once just nodded from their porches started coming by, checking in, even apologizing for not stepping up sooner. Malik got letters from a few kids on the block. Simple words like, "Sorry that happened to you, and you didn't deserve that." They meant more than I could say. It didn't erase what happened, but it helped. Karen wasn't arrested that night, but she was issued a citation for misuse of emergency services. Word spread fast, and the HOA scheduled a special meeting to address community behavior. For the first time, people were openly talking about things they used to ignore: a Cole's bias, profiling, and the quiet ways people get pushed out or singled out for simply existing while black. It wasn't just about Malik anymore. It was bigger than that. Detective Lewis stopped by a few days later, not as an officer, just as a neighbor. She brought Malik a basketball and told him how brave he was for staying calm. That moment reminded me that there are still people in the system trying to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. Malik has gone back to his routine: school, basketball, chores, but he walks a little taller now. And so do I, because what happened that night started out as a dangerous, unfair moment, but it sparked change. It opened eyes. It reminded our neighborhood that silence helps no one. And standing up even for something as simple as taking out the trash can mean everything to anyone watching. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts reveal the biggest truths. And sometimes the most ordinary moments are when we need courage the most. Because what happened to Malik could happen to anyone's child. And that's exactly why we can't stay silent.